Good evening, everyone in Europe, and as always, good afternoon to friends joining in North America. I hope you're all well wherever you are. My name is Barry Colfer, and I'm a research fellow at St Edmunds College at the University of Cambridge. And I'm the co-convener of this series, the Cambridge series on the future of the island of Ireland. It is my great pleasure to introduce this, our 10th meeting of this series, where Eileen Weir will discuss uniting people from the grassroots in conversation with Professor Bronwen Walter and Dr. Niamh Gallagher. Before introducing our speakers, as always, I want to mention a couple of small items of housekeeping. We're delighted to be continuing the series, as always, over the coming months, and I'll share a link to our website where you can find details about upcoming events, recordings of past ones, and details of our mailing list. Next week, on the 1st of November, we're going to welcome Lord Robin Eames. A week following this, we'll have former Taoiseach John Bruton. And then after a week of a break, the politicos will be delighted to hear we're going to have, in succession, Matt Carty from Sinn Féin, Ivana Bacik from Irish Labour, and Doug Beattie from the UUP, bringing us through to the 6th of December. So we meet 6 p.m. Monday evenings. As always, some of you have submitted questions already, and the questions and answer function is enabled, so please use it to submit further questions. I'll be looking at it for the next 30 minutes, and we'll try to get through as many questions as possible at the time we have. As always, please do your best to keep questions concise as you can manage, and please state your affiliation if you have one and if you think it's relevant. So to introduce our speaker, Eileen Weir is a community development practitioner with extensive experience in building community capacity, supporting community cohesion and strategic community development across Ireland. Eileen is currently employed by the Shankill Women's Centre as the Greater North Belfast Women's Network Coordinator, funded by the Community Relations Council and the North Belfast Good Relations Programme. Eileen has also worked to establish neighbourhood networks to build groups to meet, share information and build capacity across the region. Eileen also works within West Belfast with a wide range of community organisations and women's groups, and is currently working towards creating a West Belfast women's network. Eileen's work has helped her to build relationships and networks of people throughout the island of Ireland. We've heard from a load of senior politicians, and we will again, and that's important and necessary to understand the future of the island of Ireland. But I have to say, I'm absolutely thrilled to hear from Eileen about her important work, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our series, and thanks again, Eileen, for being with us. Eileen's discussant will be Professor Bronwen Walter, Emerita Professor of Irish Diaspora Studies at her sister university in Cambridge, Anglia Ruskin University. Bronwen's research and publications include Outsiders Inside, Whiteness, Place and Irish Women, 2001, and Discrimination in the Irish Community in Britain with Mary Hickman, 1997. Bronwen is currently researching multi-generational Irish identities in Britain, Newfoundland and New Zealand, and comparative experiences with Korean descent communities in Japan, which sounds extremely interesting. Before handing over to Eileen, I also am delighted to be joined by my colleague, Dr. Niamh Gallagher from St. Catherine's College. Dr. Gallagher is Assistant Professor at the Faculty of History and Modern British and Irish History, and the author of Ireland and the Great War, Social and Political History, Bloomsbury 2019, which won the Royal Historical Society 2020 Whitfield Prize. My co-convener, Professor Biagini, sends his apologies as he's unable to join with us this evening. As for format, as always, Eileen is going to speak for about 10 minutes, before a conversation for about 20 minutes with Professor Walter and Dr. Gallagher, and then questions and answers. I'll be gathering up questions for the next 20 minutes. Please use the questions and answers box, preferably over the chat box if possible. That's enough from me. Eileen, thank you again very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for inviting me along to this conversation. It'll probably turn into a dialogue, but that's the way things happen. A wee bit of a background about myself. I was born and reared on Shankill Road and was in my early teens when the conflict actually happened here in Northern Ireland. I just hear the ice cream man here. This is the joys of working from home. I sort of way, you know, when I was 15, 16 years of age, you know, that's when the troubles really were taking off. When I was probably 16, 18 years of age, we had like no-go areas here in Belfast. And without my mother's permission or without my mother even knowing, I joined the UDA. And the part that I joined the UDA in was more of a welfare side. You weren't given a gun or anything like that. You were looking after the elderly in the community who couldn't get out for their basic milk, butter, bread. And we made sure that the older community within those communities were actually well looked after. And we also kept a wee eye on the men who were on the barricades, manning the barricades, to make sure that the wee dolls were kept away from the barricades, so there was no distraction. And then I started working, and really at that time you didn't really communicate with anybody from another community. You stayed within your own community. The town centre was closed, so my teenage years weren't of a normal teenage years where you were going to dances or going to clubs or anything like that. It just wasn't possible to do here at that time. And then I started working in Gallagher's. I started working in Gallagher's in 1975 and was very heavily involved in the trade union movement, which I came to join. I wasn't so long just a member of the union. I was elected shop steward for the shop floor within, I think, the first year of me becoming, and I think that was because it was very focal. So people wanted somebody to be focal. And from there, my experience from being just a member of the trade union, being a shop steward of the Amalgamated Transport and General Workers Union, I then became deputy convener. But part of my role, when I was shop steward and deputy convener, that was men and women. But a part of the union, at that time, they set up women's advisory groups in all the regions that the trade union covered. So I then became a member of the Women's Advisory Committee. And that Women's Advisory Committee was a North-South advisory committee. It just wasn't Belfast. We would have met one time in the North, and then the next time we would have met in the South, vice versa. And then on a quarterly basis, we used to go over to London and meet in London. So we got a good sense of what was happening within women. And at that time, again, there was things coming to the Women's Advisory Committee. Within the conflict, they started to do strip searching in Armagh prison. And the people who they were searching were Republican women prisoners. Now, in the community that I come from, that was a Republican issue because it was Republican women prisoners that was being strip searched. It was brought to our advisory committee to see if the trade union would actually, lobby against strip searching. And after a conversation that we had among ourselves, we decided that we would support action against strip searching. Now, what I learned from that, and I still till today use what I learned all those years ago, was that was strip searching the right thing to do? Was it right that people were strip searched? Never mind who it was, they were strip searching. And no, it wasn't right. So on the basis of human rights and civil rights, I then lobbied against strip searching. And at that time, I couldn't have come into my own community and said that I was doing that. So I was sort of living a parallel life as such in my own community. I didn't get involved in really anything more active, within unionism or loyalism. My focus then went on rights spaces. I then would have looked at the civil rights movement at that time. And, it sort of widened my horizon that if we took the labels off and if we looked outside the box, then we could see the truth and what we should be doing as women to stop anything like this happening. It was a hard time during the Troubles because women were very restricted. Because if you had a partner who was interned or in the long cash CH blocks, you weren't really allowed to live. You couldn't have went out to a pub and sat and talked to an Armand. You were in trouble. You couldn't have went with army if you were coming from a Republican nationalist background. You couldn't have went out with somebody from the security forces. You would have been tarred and feathered and put on a lamppost. But women then were the ones who went up and down to the prisons with the new jeans, the Oxford shoes. But women were the backbone of the community at that time. They kept the dinner on the table, and kept the kids at school and things like that. So after 20 years of doing that within the trade union movement, I was made redundant, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I couldn't think. I had an awful lot of skills. I got an awful lot of training for employment, equal opportunities, flags and emblems. All these acts all came out at that time. And I didn't know really what to do with it. And with trade union movement, religion never came into it, or your community background never came into it, because it was all done on rights basis. And again, that's still to this day, religion doesn't come into it, no matter where you're from. If you're a woman, you're a woman. So, after those 20 years, I then done a couple of different things, a driving instructor, a black taxi driver, and trying to find out where I wanted to go. And then I decided I would start volunteering for Shankill Women's Centre. I ended up getting a job. I was there for 7 years. Funding run out. I moved to another area and worked in another area for a number of years. Came back to Shankill Women's Centre. This is actually my 4th time back into Shankill Women's Centre. But the times that I moved out of the Shankill Women's Centre give me immense, I developed me as a person. We worked up in the prison with women who were due to come out. And we were the community workers that went into town and helped those women resettle back into their own communities again. I worked in areas that I wouldn't have got the experience of working in if I had stayed in Shankill Women's Centre. So I got my eyes open big time. Once you move out of an organisation that's doing fantastic work and you go to other areas 3 miles away, and really they were 15 years behind what we were doing within the Women's Centre. So I was able to empower those women in those areas that I worked with, and they done very well. Well, it brings me back to today, and I'm still doing what I'm doing, and hopefully that it's a good relations here, and they call peace building here, and we have all these labels and all these names. And what it is, it's about building relationships, and it's about building relationships with each other from across all the communities, not just the 2 main visiting communities. We have a lot of people coming in from other countries here now. And if we keep talking the language that we're talking here about cross-community work or even cross-border work, we're leaving a big part of the population out, because we have women coming in from other communities and other countries and trying to seek asylum here with refugees. And if we don't change our language here, then how are we expected to make them people feel welcome if they're not included in any way we talk, shape or form? So part of my work is about being inclusive, and it's about bringing everybody in and trying to get the right voices sitting at the table when issues arrive, which is a big struggle, which we're still trying to do. So really, that's a bit about me. So I know it wasn't 10 minutes, Barry, but I'm leaving plenty of time for questions.
It was actually nearly exactly 10 minutes. So if you did that on purpose. But Eileen, it was absolutely fascinating to hear your background and your bio. I can't think of many better people to discuss it with you than Bronwen and Niamh. So without further ado, Bronwen, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Eileen. A very, very interesting story, and one that we rarely hear in England. Especially during the Troubles, we were not really allowed to hear about ordinary people in Northern Ireland. There were some very good documentaries made, and they were suppressed, only shown about 10 years afterwards. So I think there was strong emphasis on only hearing about the divisions, which then justified, British government coming in, but perhaps that's being a bit cynical. But I know that we were not really allowed to hear the normal stories of people on the ground, even though their lives weren't normal, but they were, ordinary people. So it's very, very interesting to get your take on that. I suppose what's come out from what you say is the importance of people on the ground making relationships, and that women are pleased to do that it's not very difficult to get women to agree to see that there's far more than divisions that they can share and get along with and learn from and have, better lives, more agreement, more cooperation. So I suppose one thing I would like to know more about from you is about the gap that there appears to be between the political parties and their hostilities and implacable divisions and people on the ground who don't share that approach. And there seems to be a large gap. And is there a way in which people on the ground like yourself are having any influence on decisions that are made higher up?
No. I think what part of the problem is probably part of not being recognized is a lot down to our own fault in a certain aspect, because the women's centres were started here before the Good Friday Agreement. Now, Shankill Women's Centre is 36 years old. Falls Women's Centre is 38 years old, long before the Good Friday Agreement. So women were building relationships prior to the Good Friday Agreement. So when the Good Friday Agreement came, we then could start doing our work above the radar rather than under the radar. But we took us a while to do that. And I think, in hindsight, we should have come out strong then of what we were doing. I firmly believe we wouldn't, because of the work that we were doing at grassroots level. There was 14 women's centres right across the whole province. And I think that the work that them women were doing in those centres at that time was, that's how we got the Good Friday Agreement. I don't believe we would have had a Good Friday Agreement if we hadn't been doing the work at grassroots level. Because the Good Friday Agreement was a sense of hope, and that's what women wanted. They wanted hope for the future, not necessarily just for them, but for their children, for their grandchildren, for their families. And we didn't get any. When I say peace dividend, I don't mean money all the time, but we didn't get any peace dividend within the women's movements. And we had worked the whole way through all the negotiation and everything else. And that has left us here 23 years of the Good Friday Agreement, still asking to get a seat at the table. Now, we have different levels within community. I'm grassroots. I work with women on the ground. I hear what's happening on the ground. But we have another level within the women's movement where we have lobbyists and we have people doing research within the women's movement. And then we have women who are politicians. And there seems to be an awful lot of, from the top to the middle, from the middle to the top, but very little from the grassroots up to that level. And we still find it very, very hard to get our voices heard. What you're hearing on TV at the minute with our political parties is always this orange and green fight. Everything comes down to orange and green, and people are frustrated. the women that I work with are frustrated. They have switched off of their politics, because everything that comes up, there has to be an orange and green issue or a threat that they're going to bring Stormont down. And really that bringing Stormont down doesn't scare me in the least, because the last two things that we have achieved was when Stormont was down, or we got things passed through Westminster that Stormont couldn't. Like gay marriage was one of them, and the Abortion Act was another one. And those were two things that we have been fighting years for, couldn't get it. And as soon as the Assembly went down for 3 years, we were able to lobby Westminster and get those things put in place. So it doesn't, for me and for the women's movement and the women's sector, we're actually saying, well, what will get through this time if the Assembly goes down? We're always looking at, we'll Stormont's not there, we'll go to Westminster, and we have been very successful in the past, because we just don't work with women within the women's sector. We work with Rainbow, and we work with GL, we work with all the other organisations that's fighting the lobby who have women in them. So it's not just about women's centres, it's centres and groups who have women in them, and that's who we would lobby them for. But, we don't get I think our politicians are very out of touch of what's happening on the ground, because they're so focused on, if you get that, we're going to get this. It was, it's always an orange and green battle. I have to say, over the last couple of years, I have seen a bit of a swing towards the other political parties, especially our council elections here, where a number of the smaller Green Party got a couple of extra seats. Alliance is doing fantastically well, and even the SDLP is coming up as well. But we have those smaller parties that's gaining seats, and to me, that's a change in the culture, and I think that's because people are fed up voting for the same old rhetoric. The same old. And, my job is about making a better life for women in the future. And I am sick of listening about what had happened in the past. We can't forget about the past. It's there. We need to deal with the issues in the past, but we shouldn't be trying to stop the growth of people on grassroots level who want to move forward and make new friends.
So that sounds much more optimistic than we usually hear, because we only hear the orange and green going on. A little ironic that Westminster is now pushing the protocol, against the protocol. And I gather that people on the ground like yourself and can see there's been many advantages to Northern Ireland in having the protocol, and that the only reason it's such a battle is for political reasons, often, particularly in Westminster, but obviously at Stormont as well.
Yeah, the protocol, it needs fixed. There is problems with the protocol, and there's problems with the protocol not only here in Northern Ireland, but there's problems with the protocol for people in the mainland too, with especially companies who are trying to send goods to Northern Ireland. So the protocol, it just doesn't affect Northern Ireland, but the way it's being put out through the media, it's a Northern Ireland problem. And it's not just a Northern Ireland problem. It needs fixed. There is a fear. Some people are fearing losing of our Britishism and fear of their identity. And that's a genuine fear with some people. We're hearing an awful lot about the minority, but we're not hearing an awful lot about the majority. There's parts in that protocol where it would bring an industry and it would bring jobs. Now, not only would Northern Ireland benefit out of that, but people in England would benefit out of that as well. because jobs, it's freedom of movement here, and we have that freedom of movement. But if we bring in the industry that we could onto the single market, that actually is a big, big benefit to the mainland as well. But we're not hearing very much about that. We're not hearing about bringing that industry in. We have all this antisocial behaviour that you have in England and right across the whole continent, where we have drugs, alcohol, a lack of employment, a lack of self-esteem, a lack of confidence. Mental health is a big, big, big issue here. And nothing would do more for that and all of that if they were getting up to go to a job the next day. Give them something worth. They feel worth within themselves, and it would give them hope for the future. But we're not hearing about that industry coming in the way that it could come in and build a better society, not just for people here in Northern Ireland, but people right across Great Britain, right across the United Kingdom. It would benefit everybody. And yes, there is problems with it. I'm not saying that there isn't. There is problems with protocol because of that fear of loyalism, believe that they're losing their identity, and it's a constitutional thing. And I don't fear it, but that doesn't mean to say that there's not other people that do fear it, and there is. I think we're coming a long way of getting it sorted. I have to say the Vice President of the European Union was here a couple of weeks ago. And I don't know who pulled my name out of the hat, but I got the opportunity, and I didn't say no to the opportunity. And the group that I met with, the Women's Centre lobbyist was there, and it was Equal Opportunities Commission, the Fair Employment Commission, Human Rights Commission. That was all around the table. And we put a couple of things down because, as you've said, on the media, we just hear orange and green protocol. We were just hearing the fear of people losing their British identity. And at that meeting, I had said to the president, and I can't even announce his name, so I'm not even going to try to announce his name. I says, that's all we're hearing. And I says, and if Europe is doing something, we need to hear, the people need to hear what it is you're offering. What it is you're putting on the table. And lo and behold, he came on the TV and told exactly what they've tried to do. He listened. And, anything that we brought up at that meeting about the problems that the protocol was causing, he has went a long way of fixing some of those issues that we were concerned about. Now, we're not the only one with those issues, but round that table, that was, I just, when he came on and done it, I just smiled. Here's me. He has listened. Yeah.
That's really, really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
How grassroots can be important, especially in that case, the EU, they were listening. Yeah. So some people are listening. It's, a certain group who will not.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you one other thing about men's groups? I mean, we don't hear about men's centres. I don't believe they are existing, but from what you've talked about, women's cover a large amount of working class, particularly life, or, everybody's life, because of partners, children. So when we talk about women, we're talking about a big proportion of the population, but I don't know where men's views on these issues sit. Are they some representatives in the areas you're talking about, or is this very much a women's initiative taking the foreground to try to bring about change? Are men more tied into perhaps the traditional political parties? What would you say about this?
I say when you educate a woman, you educate the family. And all the family have men in them. So it's not that, it's just, there's a whole lot of reasons why we have women's centres here over the years. And we'll go into that. We have a thing called men's sheds here. So we have men's sheds, and we have, I know of two just locally here. And this is men who come out and they would help maybe some young lad, to do, you leave in old tools and they make them new tools, and then they make furniture, make different things. It's more hand stuff. It's more making stuff and selling it, and then building up their own funds. But we have a lot of men's sheds that be funded here. We have a situation here that, the men are round the table and have been round the table from the Good Friday Agreement. So their voices are being heard.
Yeah.
Women aren't round that table, and the women's voices aren't being heard. So it's not now. Shankill Women's Centre in particular was actually asked, would they set up a man's centre? And we said, look, you start it up, you get the premises, you do what you have to do, and we will help in any way that we can, but we're not going to do it for you. Because the culture is they'll do it for us, and we'll just sit back and take the goodies. We're not opposed of helping. Actually, as a matter of fact, we actually put in to a couple of the funders that we could actually educate men as well. So it's a separate, it's not women's centre funding, it's about men. And we have put them through forklift driving. We have put them through, their card to go onto a building site. We have put them through a number of courses through Shankill Women's Centre. But it's a separate bit of funding. So where we get an opportunity and where we have the facility to be able to do it, we will do it. There's a lot of men out there working now because they've done a course in Shankill Women's Centre. So, I'm not saying all women's centres do that.
Very interesting.
I'm not saying all women's centres do that, but I know that we do it because a lot of the women come in, have kids, we educate from the cradle to the grave because we have our childcare and we have our health and well-being projects. And that's, I think the oldest member coming in now is 90 something and the youngest is 3 months old. So it's everything in between. And it's a shared space. It's a safe space. So women from whatever community background feel free to come into it. We do we do language courses for anybody that's coming here from a different country and do their basic English, basic maths, and we do that to help people who have moved here who really want to get a job, but they need their basic English and need their basic maths, and then we do GCSE classes as well. So then it gives them a better opportunity of work. But the women's movement is a lot bigger than the women's centres. I don't like splitting them because it was split by government. It wasn't split by us. We were always called the women's movement, but now we're the women's sector, who's part of the women's movement. So it's a bit of division, but it's only a divide in words only. We all sit around the table with all the other 14 women's centres. I'm also involved in Reclaim the Agenda. I'm also involved in Reclaim the Night. I'm involved in Alliance for Choice. I'm involved in a lot of other committees, and we all work together. So you don't have to belong to a women's centre. Here in Rainbow Project, anything that has women in them. It's not just about women's centres. Yes, women's centres have a specific role within that movement. Well, we've done a fantastic, you can look it up, it's a feminist recovery plan coming out of COVID. I don't know, Niamh, if you've seen it or anything yet, but if you put it in the feminist recovery plan, it just was relaunched there in June, and everything that has affected women with COVID and the recovery plan is in that document. It was done by Women's WRDA, Women's Resource and Development Agency, who employs a lobbyist, and she done that and has presented that to Stormont on a number of occasions, and we still haven't heard anything back from it. And that covers from grassroots right up to the present day of how women, once again, has kept communities going here in Northern Ireland. Now, I'm saying that I'm very much aware that women has kept communities going throughout UK and Ireland, throughout the thing. But here, we kept communities going during the conflict here. You know, you can even go back to the wars. We kept communities going. You know, a lot of the women who were made furloughed, a lot of them weren't because they were on minimum wage. You know, they weren't being furloughed because they were on 0-hour contracts. You know, so COVID affected women more than men because of the type of jobs that they done, and they just were left. So there's a lot of stuff that we're sort of lobbying now. 0-hour contracts is you know, when you're even we're talking about the future where the gas bills has went up, where the electric bills gone up. You know, we're not just messing about with people's money and their income. We're messing about with people's lifestyles here. Because it doesn't matter what it's gonna mess about with my lifestyle. I'll not have the same lifestyle as I have now because of what's coming to us round the corner. And you know, everybody's going to be affected that, but the ones that will take the blunt of that will be the grassroots and the working class, because they don't have any spare coppers in their kitty. And you know what I mean, the rich is getting richer and the poor is getting poorer. So, you know, why are we still doing 0-hour contract when they can't get people employed now? Why can they not get people employed? Because of their conditions that they're actually asking people. And with the welfare system at the minute, you know, you could maybe be on a contract, 0-hour contract, and get 15 hours a week, and then it's reduced. And maybe 1 week it'll go up. And if your money changes within those 0-hour contract, you have to wait 6 weeks before your benefits come through again. So you can't even work extra hours, especially coming up to Christmas. Last year, we noticed it more last year because a lot of the shops and a lot of the things look for extra staff over Christmas. And nobody could apply for those jobs because if they did, 6 weeks after they finished working, they were without money for 6 weeks. So it just wasn't worth, you know, taking on extra money to be able to do that. But again, we focus on what's happening now and what we'd like to see in the future. We don't focus very much on the past. We do focus on the Good Friday Agreement, of parts of the Good Friday Agreement that we voted for, which was accepted here, and we still don't have a Bill of Rights here in Northern Ireland. We still don't have a Bill of Rights. So, you know, I mean, and coming out of Europe was a big, big problem for us coming out of Europe. We voted to remain in the European Union because we had a certain amount of rights within the European, because we couldn't depend on Stormont giving those rights to us. So coming out of Europe, especially for women, where, you know, working conditions and things like that, you know, it's sort of it penalised a lot more women than it did men. And I'm not putting men down for that. It's just the type of work, the type of jobs that's offered, because there's a lot of men on 0-hour contract too. So if you have a husband and you're on 0-hour contracts and he's on 0-hour contracts, how can society sustain that? It just can't. So I heard on the news today that they're putting the livable wage up to £9.50, £9.75. Well done, them. You know, I just don't get it. there was a thing, I don't know if I can say it on this because this is being recorded, but I when you meet politicians, you know who grew up with money in their pocket and who didn't. You know, one politician said to me one time, I know what it's like. I says, what do you mean you know what it's like? He says, I cleaned my arse with newspaper too. And there's not many politicians can clean their backside with newspaper. But everybody that I know did, you know, and that's the difference. Because if you're putting your hand in your pocket and looking to see, do I buy milk or do I buy bread? There's not many politicians can actually do that. And they need to try and start understanding that it's not only the loss of money, it's a loss of a lifestyle, that all these increases. So they need to bring the wages up and create proper jobs for people to get out there and do a proper day's work.
Thanks so much. Indeed, thanks, Bronwen. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Eileen. It's such a pleasure to hear all that, and good chance now to move over to Niamh.
Brilliant. Eileen, I really enjoyed that. Thank you. And when you talked about your name being pulled out of a hat, I wish you were pulled out of more hats more often. And we got to hear your voice more often as opposed to some of the other singular stories that you mentioned. I want to go back to some of the early days of your politics, and you talked about trade unionism. And I wonder in this, I mean, surely there's a lot of alignment between working class, nationalist, Republican, unionist, loyalist communities. And so I wonder what your views are on why Labour was never able to unite around these common economic questions, and why the big constitutional divides always seem to shine through and win.
Yeah, I think, you know, politics here is sort of when we had industry, if I can give you sort of an example of what was just at the Good Friday Agreement and at the times of the conflict here, we had the shipyard, we had Mackey's, we had Sirocco Works, we had the rope works, we had all the linen industry, we had umpteen big industries here, which would have helped the labour movement, which did at that time help the labour movement. And because I believe, I don't know if it was right or wrong, but I firmly believe we lost a lot of those industries because they brought an Unfair Employment Act in here. And it wasn't what they'd done with all the big industries was count the many Protestants and count the many Catholics that they were working. Mm-hmm. And they had a 3 mile radius. And if that's 3 mile radius said 50-60 or 60-40, then that workplace had to have 60-40 in their employment. Now, because of the troubles, because of the conflict, we had Protestant areas that came Catholic areas. We had Catholic areas that came Protestant areas. So the whole makeup of when those industries started, the 3 mile radius had changed unbelievable. Mm-hmm. That the figures weren't going to meet. And instead of working on that and bringing the balance in, due natural wastage and things like that. So we lost hundreds of thousands of jobs here on this. Where it's, you know, I mean, it's about like losing the coal mine in a part of Wales, you know, which was a big devastating impact. We lost all our industry here and never was able to bring any, never has come back to that. Mm-hmm. And when we had that, we would have heard more about Labour and Labour politics and down that line of Labourism. Mm-hmm. But because of the conflict here, you didn't hear very much from Labour.
Really interesting, yeah.
Yeah, today, because the two main parties then was Orange and Green. Mm-hmm. And anything outside that, it was, you didn't vote for the person you wanted. You voted to keep the other person out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I tag something very quickly onto that? I don't want to interrupt you too much, but This is an area I'm really interested in. Eileen, during your intervention, you mentioned that religion still never came into the trade union movement. That's something that really fascinates me. So could you just perhaps comment a little bit on how the story you described about the divided communities versus religion ever coming out in the trade union movement? How did that work?
Not only does it not come out in the trade union movement, it doesn't come out in the women's sector either. We've never discussed religion because it's not about religion. It's about people's rights. It's about, getting civic society being made aware of what's actually happening and trying to get civic society, who that may be, it doesn't matter who it is, but it's civic society's involvement. So if we have people coming here and settling here from other parts of Europe, which they did do, we have people here from Scotland, with people here from England, with people here from Syria. We have travellers that's here too. We have all those people here, and that's civic society. And civic society need to have a voice, because if civic society doesn't have a voice, it's not going to get any better. Because if they keep doing what they want at the top of the tree, the roots is going to crumble, and then you have the conflict, and then that's brought into orange and green conflict as well, as we've seen with the protocol. We still have trouble here every weekend at interfaces. Lanark Way was nothing. The only thing different about the riot at Lanark Way was there was petrol bombs. But other than that, we have that type of violence nearly every weekend. But it's Facebook violence, if you know what I mean. We're going to have a riot the night down such and such. It's not sectarian, and that's hard to say, but it's not, I'm going to get them to, it's recreational, more now rather than us and them. These things are arranged. But, and I think religion comes into it far too much here, or you hear about religion far too much here. As you said earlier on, Bronwen, you're not hearing the grassroots people whose religion doesn't come in. Now, I'm not saying everybody, but the people who I work with within the Women's Centre, and people who I work with within the women's movement and within the network, we never once bring religion into it. Not once. It's just you're a woman, and that's it.
Fascinating, Eileen. I've loads more questions, but I'm going to ask another one, and then hopefully we can go to the Q&A, and several more thereafter. But it's about gender, Eileen, and this comes through almost everything you've been talking about. The fact that there are perceived roles for women, and that men have special privileges that women can never be a part of, even down to when you said the wee dolls were kept away from the barricades, which I thought was just brilliantly described that moment. So I was wondering if you can say a bit about your involvement in loyalist groups, particularly your time around, maybe when you were with the UDA, about paramilitaries, and how were women perceived in loyalist paramilitaries? And was there a difference, do you think, between the Republican equivalent?
Absolutely. Within my background and what I seen at that time, what I grew up with, women were the tea makers within the Protestant communities, the tea makers, the message goers, and the welfare, looking after older people and looking after the kids at school and everything else, because all the buses was off here, so people would have just, white fan man with two benches up beside of it was your bus to get you to school, and some great funny stories and a hard time, but I think it was humour kept us going and all that. I don't know if any, you probably could count on your one hand, and I haven't researched this, but growing up and being part of that UDA organisation at that time, and right till I was 20, if I could name 5 loyalist women prisoners, I would be a good one.
Gosh.
And some of those 5 that I could name, to me, weren't really loyalist women prisoners. They were doing something else, and they were claimed as political status. I'm not saying them all, There were some of them claim as political status because they got better conditions.
Yeah.
So that was that. Within the Republican movement, women's army was just fought along with the men. They were equals within that. Now, I'm sure they had their own wee difficulties in that, but they were seen as equals. And that goes right back to 1916 and all that. And they were very, very, very strong in that. And you know, I speak to all politicians, and a very good friend of mine, I call her a good friend, although we see things completely different, is Martina Anderson. I met Martina Anderson. I was asked would I meet the unionist engagement person for Sinn Féin. And I went, what? The unionist engagement person for Sinn Féin? And my words were, it's a pity the Unionist Party didn't have a unionist engagement person, you know, because at that time, even Sinn Féin had a unionist engagement. And I met up with her secretly. I met up secretly with her a couple of times, and she was on the Shankill, and she wanted to interview a loyalist male. And there was a guy that I got in touch with. He was a guy from one of the border towns, and he was very passionate about his band, which I would call a true loyalist, and it's my terminology. And she just didn't get it. She just didn't get the culture at all. But that's okay, you know. That defined Martina, but it's trying to get people. So you know that was a risk I took at that time, because you know Martina was she was a bomber and everything else. So sometimes we had to speak to people that you know other people would not agree with who you speak to, and that still happens today. You have to be very, very careful where you bring them to. And I used to do Falls Radio for Shankill Women's Centre. We were invited over. Before they had the villa, they'd done a community radio a fortnight every year in August, and I was always asked over to do a slot, and that was to bring information from Shankill over into the Falls, really, you know, what groups are doing, and I would have invited other groups in along with me. And Martina had said to me, Eileen, where are we going to take this? I says, I know where we're going to take it. We're going to take it on the Falls Radio. Bring women from Shankill to come, you know, and we have the conversation. And I says, but be warned, what we're going to talk about, and I know what I'm going to talk about, is Sinn Féin not been on the policing boards.
Yeah, I mean, Eileen, I could talk to you all night. I have so many questions to ask you, but I think I have to go to Barry now, and maybe you can address some of the questions from some of the attendees tonight. Thank you very much, Eileen.
You're welcome.
Not for the first time. It's with great difficulty that I interrupt a session. It would be wonderful to hear more of this flow, but we've also had some great questions from participants. So Eileen, I'm going to put 3 questions to you. 2 of them are fairly small, and I'm going to put them together. The first is from John Cushnahan, former leader of the Alliance and former Fine Gael MEP. John, thanks for being with us. John asks, has the women's movement in Northern Ireland developed many links with women's groups in the Republic of Ireland? This is something you mentioned, Eileen, but it would be really nice to unpack a little bit. And also whether there's any major differences that you can tell us about. The second short question comes from Sheila Watts, who's she's a lecturer in German here at Cambridge. How are you, Sheila? Sheila says, quote, my mother grew up in Belfast and remembered campaigning for Betty Sinclair, who stood for the Communist Party.
Yeah.
People from the Protestant community who have left-wing views vote for now. Eileen.
Yeah, it goes back, Betty Sinclair, it goes back a while. The context with Southern women's groups, very anything we do here, we actually campaigned for the gay marriage down in Dublin. We went and the abortion, and we went and supported their lobbies. We were talking about that now, but 22 years ago, I worked with Tala down in the Dublin Shankill Women's Centre, and Tala had a culture and diversity programme. and we were funded. And we worked with the Shankill in Tala and the women from Shankill. Mine was cross-community, cross-border, because I had women from a different community background. And this is funders speak, not my speak, but 22 years ago, we were doing that. And we picked up what we had. Now, the women today still talk about that, and we still have Zoom meetings with that same group today, 22 years on. So yes, on that level we do. The women then, and it's still today because we have those conversations, they suffered, although we were suffering. I heard this actually came from a woman from the Shankill, and she actually said to me that we thought we had our troubles with the Troubles, but Dublin also have their troubles, the drugs, racketeering, which we're experiencing now. But 22 years ago, it was much different, because we had the conflict, we had the troubles, but they also, as women, had to deal with a lot of other stuff. We weren't dealing with drugs at that stage, but what they were dealing with in Tala, you could have thought you could put that whole area into Shankill now and Falls, and we have the same problems today as what they had. And I've worked with a lot. I also, my time out of Shankill Women's Centre, I was the coordinator of a crisis centre for suicide, mental health, and we tied up with groups down in Dublin, in North City Dublin, and we worked with the families groups down there, with the families groups here. So and I also part of the women's movement, but it was only a 15-hour job, was working with women in the prison, and we went down to the prison in Dublin, and just sort of when I do anything, and most people who do the work that I do, I always say I'm rerouted. I reroute myself. I don't do things in the traditional manner, and we do things outside the box. So when I seen problems within the prison service here, I got in touch with one of my friends down in Dublin who was working in the women's prison down in Dublin to arrange a visit for the probation, the prison, and ourselves to go and see what they were doing down there. So it's always looking at good practices, and a lot of areas within in the Dublin and in not only Dublin, but in the whole South, they have some good practices there that we go down and look at and see if it's something that we can actually adopt where we are to make lives a wee bit better in the community. So yes, the contexts are, yes, all the Abortion Act, the gay marriage, all that stuff, we lobby on behalf. On International Women's Day, we put on buses, and them groups from the South come up and join us on International Women's Day here in Belfast. The other question again was
from Sheila about who do left-leaning people in the Protestant community vote for now?
Who do they vote for?
Yeah.
I hope they don't vote for the UP. I think, this is part of the problem, because we're still in not as well as it was, but we still are voting to keep people out. We don't vote. A lot of people don't vote here for their politics. I'm not saying some do. Some, there's DUP have their conduit of people. Sinn Féin have their conduit of people who will always vote them, and no matter what. But I'm seeing a lot of the younger ones coming and voting Alliance, and even the Green Party, because climate's going to be a big issue here too. And I don't know, I don't, listening to Doug Beattie, he may change, but he needs to sort of be speaking out and saying what he's going to change. I have a lot of time for the Ulster Unionist Party, because I would be friendly with some. I've done dialogues with some of their ministers, and the ministers that I have been in contact with actually know what's going on the ground, and that give me a wee bit of hope. So I'm only hoping that Doug Beattie listens to those other ones. but I see a swing towards Alliance Party, you know, and I think there would be a bigger swing towards SDLP if they didn't have that constitutional question of United Ireland in it too. That puts an awful lot of people off, and really, I don't believe personally that I'll see United Ireland in my lifetime. You know, and to have it in your document is only securing your voters. Where if you take that out and let United Ireland, if it come the way that it's meant to come, we don't need parties having that in the referendum. We don't need parties to have that because it's in the Good Friday Agreement. And then maybe people would vote for people if that's not a hidden agenda around things to do. Where politics are still very much orange and green here to a big degree.
We can all tune back in on the 6th of December if anyone's interested. And Eileen, maybe you can join us and you can throw some zingers at Doug Beattie. He'll be joining us.
Ah, good. There
you are. Not for the first time over this series as well, I think of John Hume, the quote famously attributed to John that you can't eat a flag, and whether you're in the Falls or in the Shankill or Dublin or anywhere, you know, if you choose between bread or milk, kind of everything else boils down to that, doesn't it? There is one. I would still like to involved. I'm involved now at this minute in time in the Civil Rights Committee. I won their award 2 years ago, the Civil Rights Award. So, you know, it's something I'm still very passionate about and still get involved in. I need an hour, a couple of days in the week and an hour, 4 hours at the end of every day to be able to fit it all in. But I have to go down shining. Fantastic. No, I'm sure everyone would agree. I don't know how you fit it in already in a mere 24 hours in the day. The final question, I'm just going to package as kind of as a remark. It comes from Brian Donaldson, forgive me. And then I'm going to go back to Niamh and Bronwen very briefly, just if you have a minute, if you want to respond to anything Eileen said. Brian he says, "Thank you, Eileen. Great to hear your story. Brian would like to ask if you feel the real history of Northern Ireland should be taught at school level. We learn so much about World War I, the famine, but very little about our actual local history that's shaped the modern day-to-day life for all of us." I think it's a very prescient question because I feel like this has been a service to history and a service to kind of the betterment of our understanding of the context in which you work, Eileen. So thank you very, very much for it. Niamh and then Bronwen, then we can give Eileen the last word.
Brilliant. Thank you. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation, Eileen. Really enriched my own thoughts about lots of things. So thank you so much for that. Some of the points that strike me are this sheer disconnect between the grassroots, particularly the broadly termed working classes in Northern Ireland, and the high politics. And it sounds like there might be a little bit of movement in that. Broadly, the grassroots have been squeezed out for a very long time. And that is not only sad, but it reflects the history that we know and we hear about and do our readings on as historians, but also what we hear from the media and what the media tell us in everyday life. And to me, it suggests that actually there are other voices and other realities that we do not hear about, whether it's on the media or whether it's in the books that we read. And I think it's really important, speaking to people like you, to bring these things to the fore. And I only hope that we can have more conversations and make these more widely known. And the second point that really strikes me is gender. And again, lots of what you're talking about is really suggesting that Northern Ireland has a very strong masculine culture of masculinity, that this is a men's world and has been a man's world for a long time. And still women are the auxiliaries. Women are the ones who are, whether it was the tea makers in your movement, and where you could actually see some differences in the Republican side. No doubt there's still within Republicanism lots of differences between men and women too, which no doubt if people are watching here who were in Cumann na Ban or have any other sympathies, they might be able to join that too. So this culture of gender in Northern Ireland has been really strong, and this culture of masculinity seems to be pervasive. And I just wonder, I mean, open question, if this large-scale patriarchy will indeed shift, and is it this shift in younger generations that we can be hopeful about as people who are observers or from there in the future? So really, I'm just going to end there and say thank you so much for a really, really wonderful talk and for bringing other views to the fore. I really appreciate it, and for all of your work that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bronwen?
Yes, sorry. No, I would just echo that. I think we've learned a very great deal of things that we couldn't know except from someone like you, who is an expert on the ground. And I think you have given us some, hope that there are some optimistic parts to what's happening, and there may be change, and we just have to hope that it can build and, become stronger. But it's not quite as hopeless as some of us might have feared. So thank you very, very much for that. We could listen to you for far longer, but that's been a really interesting introduction to many new things.
Yeah.
Eileen, would you like to say any last couple of sentences before we close the meeting?
Well, I think thanks for listening, and I hope the audience got something out of it. But there's a number. Susan Mackay has just published a book, and it's worth a read. I haven't read it yet, but I'm in it. But I haven't read it yet. But there's a lot of people in it from the same community background of me, and it's about Protestantism. And I think if you want to know how the Protestants feel, there's a core mixture of people in that. It's worth a read just to get the other side of the story, and not necessarily the one that's coming across. And delighted, and gender is, and we have a periodical thing going on, because when you go back 100 years ago, women weren't even allowed to sign the Ulster Convention. Women had to sign a separate one, and the separate one got more signatures than what the man's one did. So this is something that we have been dealing with for 100 years, and just need to change that culture, that the next 100 years for our young people don't have the same struggles as what we have had. And more men feminists, we need more men feminists asking around that table, where's the women? Instead of the women always saying, we're not at the table, men should be asking for women around that table. It shouldn't be up to women to be asking.
You're here. Challenge accepted, Eileen. And we have run over a little bit this week, but I felt this was a meeting I didn't want to interrupt because of its quality and because of the level of interest. So thank you everyone for your patience, for sticking with us. I just shared a link to the book you're referring to, because I actually came across it, the Susan Mackay book, and now you've given me desire to go and read it as well, Eileen. So I just want to echo what Bronwen said, that this is our 10th meeting. And I have to say, after most of them, I don't feel hopeful or optimistic about the near future, at least. And you've certainly left me feeling that it's certainly not a place without hope, and that with the right people in the right offices, for example, next time Stormont collapses, Eileen, I want to see.
I couldn't tour party line. I just wouldn't. It's just not my politics is at grassroots level. I can get more done at grassroots level than I could sitting up at Stormont twiddling my thumbs, listening to two parties.
And thank God you're there, I think, on behalf of everybody. With that, I'm going to call it to a close. Thank you very much, Professor Walter, Dr. Gallagher, Eileen Weir. Next week, we have Robin Eames for anyone who'd like to join at 6 p.m. on Monday. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
Okay. Good night.
Thank you.